I'm Russell, 32 years old, and the middle child in a family of 5 from Phoenix, Arizona. Growing up, I was always the invisible kid, good but not exceptional, present but not memorable. A year ago, I accepted a job offer in Denver, Colorado, packed up my life, and moved away. The shocking part? No one in my family noticed until my mother called me furious about missing family gatherings. When she demanded an explanation, I simply replied, "Because I moved to Denver." Before I tell you how my entire family somehow missed that I moved across states, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible to the people who should see you most. Being the middle child in a big family meant I was sandwiched between 2 sets of siblings who commanded attention in very different ways. My father, Thomas, worked as an accountant, analytical, precise, and emotionally distant. He spoke in facts and figures, rarely in feelings. My mother, Margaret, taught elementary school, dividing her energy between her students during the day and her 5 children in the evenings. With so many demands on her time, some things inevitably fell through the cracks. Unfortunately, those things were often related to me. My older brother Eric was the family star athlete. From Little League to high school varsity, he collected trophies that lined our family room shelves. Dad never missed his games, and Mom coordinated her schedule around his practices. Every dinner conversation eventually circled back to Eric's latest athletic achievement or scholarship prospect. He was their golden child, the one they bragged about to neighbors and colleagues. My older sister Stephanie claimed the academic spotlight. She was the valedictorian, debate team captain, and eventual Ivy League graduate. Mom kept a dedicated scrapbook of her academic certificates and newspaper mentions. Family resources were readily allocated to her science competition travel or advanced tutoring needs. Stephanie's achievements were intellectual proof of my parents' excellent child rearing. Then there were my younger twin brothers, Jason and Justin. They were the family troublemakers, constantly pulling pranks or getting into scrapes that required immediate parental intervention. Their mischief earned them constant attention, even if much of it was disciplinary. They perfected the art of being problematic enough to warrant concern but charming enough to avoid serious consequences. And then there was me, Russell, not a star athlete like Eric, not an academic prodigy like Stephanie, not attention-grabbing like the twins. I was thoroughly average by family standards, which meant I was practically invisible. I tried sports first, joining the swim team in elementary school. I wasn't bad, but I certainly wasn't Eric. My parents attended exactly 2 of my meets during 4 years of competition. The first because it coincided with one of Eric's rare off weekends, and the second because it was conveniently held at the pool where the twins had swimming lessons immediately afterward. When sports didn't work, I tried academics. I maintained a solid B+ average, occasionally landing on the honor roll. My report cards earned brief nods of acknowledgement before conversation shifted to Stephanie's perfect grades or the twins' latest parent-teacher conference. It wasn't until I discovered photography in middle school that I found something that felt like mine. I saved allowance money for months to buy a second-hand camera from a neighbor's yard sale. I spent hours learning about composition, lighting, and angles through library books and free online tutorials. Photography became my refuge, a way to observe the world while remaining safely behind the lens. In sophomore year, I entered a regional photography contest on a whim. To my shock, my black and white series on urban loneliness won first place. The award ceremony fell on the same day as Eric's football semifinals. I sat alone in the school auditorium, accepted my certificate from the local arts council representative, and took the bus home. My trophy sat on my desk for 3 months before my mother noticed it during spring cleaning and asked where it came from. "I won that back in November," I told her, "for my photography." "Oh, that's nice," she said, dusting it briefly before moving on to reorganize my bookshelf. "Did we know about this competition?" "I told everyone at dinner the week before, and I put the flyer on the refrigerator." She looked momentarily troubled before her expression smoothed over. "Well, I'm sure we would have come if we could. You know how busy things get with 5 kids. By high school graduation, I'd perfected the art of self-reliance. When I was elected class vice president and assigned to give a speech, I didn't bother mentioning it to my family until the day before. Predictably, Eric had a recruiting visit with a college coach, and my parents chose to accompany him instead. Stephanie attended but spent most of the ceremony texting her college friends. The twins were too young to sit still through a graduation, so they stayed with a neighbor. I decided to attend Arizona State University while living at home to save money. My parents paid partial tuition, as they did for all my siblings, but I took out modest loans for the remainder. Meanwhile, Eric's athletic scholarship was celebrated with a backyard barbecue for extended family and neighbors. Stephanie's honors program acceptance came with new laptop and a dedicated study space in the rarely used formal dining room. I worked part-time at a local camera shop to pay for my photography equipment. My manager recognized my eye for composition and encouraged me to pursue visual arts more seriously. I switched my major from general business to marketing with a visual communications emphasis. When I shared this decision at Sunday dinner, my father frowned. Marketing? That's not very stable. What about accounting? You've always been good with numbers. I had never been particularly good with numbers. That was Stephanie. But rather than correct him, I simply nodded and continued eating. The conversation quickly shifted to the twins' latest science project explosion. After college, I landed an entry-level position at a Phoenix marketing firm. Over the next 6 years, I worked my way up to senior visual content specialist. Each promotion came with modest salary increases and expanded creative responsibilities. I mentioned these milestones during our mandatory Sunday family dinners, but they rarely generated more than passing congratulations before someone changed the subject. "That's great, son," my father would say without looking up from his plate. "Eric's team made the playoffs again this season." Or my mother would offer a distracted, "That's nice, dear," before turning to Stephanie. "Did you tell everyone about your department's grant approval?" I still attended every Sunday dinner, every holiday gathering, every family celebration. I showed up for Eric's games when he became a high school coach, helped Stephanie move into her new condo, and bailed the twins out of minor scrapes more times than I could count. I was present, supportive, and forgettable. The resentment built slowly, like water gradually eroding stone. I stopped sharing personal news. When asked direct questions about my life, I offered vague, pleasant responses that satisfied cursory interest without revealing anything meaningful. I became as invisible in conversation as I felt in their perception. By my early 30s, I had mastered the art of being physically present while emotionally absent. I could sit through entire Sunday dinners contributing nothing but pass the potatoes to the conversation. No one seemed to notice the difference. Despite my family's indifference, my career at the Phoenix marketing firm was thriving. My visual campaigns consistently outperformed expectations, and clients specifically requested my aesthetic. I found professional validation that had always eluded me at home. My colleagues respected my creative vision, sought my input on projects, and celebrated my successes. At work, I was visible. I mattered. Alexis joined our team as a copywriter 3 years after I started. Unlike most people who engaged with me superficially before moving on to more interesting personalities, she actually listened when I spoke. She noticed the quiet thoughtfulness behind my contributions during brainstorming sessions. She appreciated the subtle narratives embedded in my visual designs. "You don't just take pretty pictures," she told me once over lunch. "You tell stories without words. Not everyone can see that, but the ones who do can't look away." We became close friends, sharing creative frustrations, career ambitions, and eventually, personal struggles. Alexis was the first person outside of therapy to whom I fully described my family dynamic. "They're not bad people," I explained, picking at my sandwich. "They don't deliberately ignore me." "That almost makes it worse," she observed. "If they were actively cruel, you could write them off. But this passive forgetting? It's like you're a ghost in your own home." The accuracy of her assessment hit hard. I was a ghost present but unseen, heard but unlistened to, existing but unmemorable. 7 years into my Phoenix career, I received an unexpected LinkedIn message from the creative director of Elevation Visuals, a prestigious advertising agency in Denver. They had seen my portfolio online and were impressed by my visual storytelling approach. Would I be interested in discussing their open senior visual marketing position? The initial video interview led to a more formal second round, which led to a detailed conversation about creative vision and career growth. The position offered a 40% salary increase, creative team leadership, and the chance to work with national clients. It was the opportunity I'd been working toward for years, and yet, I hesitated. Despite the emotional void, Phoenix was home. My family was here. Sunday dinners were frustrating but familiar. Moving to Denver meant starting over a completely new city, new people, new routines. It meant admitting that my ties to family were weak enough to stretch across state lines without breaking because they were already barely there. "You're not seriously considering turning this down, are you?" Alexis demanded when I confided my doubts. We were sitting in my apartment, takeout containers spread across the coffee table. "It's complicated," I said. "Family is family, even when they're how they are." "Russell, listen to me." She set down her chopsticks. "I've watched you shrink yourself for years to fit into a space they don't even see you occupying. You deserve to be somewhere you can expand, where people actually look at what you create and see its value." She paused. "Where people actually see you." Her words resonated deeply. How long had I been contorting myself to fit into a family photograph that never quite included me in the frame? That Sunday, I decided to share the job opportunity at dinner. I waited for a natural lull in conversation, which came during dessert. "I've been offered a senior position at an advertising agency," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "It's a big step up, better title, better pay, bigger clients." My mother was serving pie, sliding a slice onto my father's plate. "That's nice, dear." "It's in Denver," I added. "I'd have to relocate." My father was absorbed in a text message, likely from a client. "Denver's got a solid economy. Housing market's competitive, though." Eric launched into a story about his team's away game in Colorado last season. Stephanie mentioned a conference she'd attended in Boulder. The twins debated which Colorado ski resorts had the best slopes. No one actually addressed the fact that I might be moving nearly 900 miles away. I tried once more. "I'm seriously considering taking it." "Whatever you think is best, son," my father said, still scrolling through his phone. "You've always been sensible." My mother patted my hand absently. "Just don't forget your Sunday dinner obligations if you take some job that wants weekend work." And that was it. My potential life-changing move had been acknowledged with the same level of interest as a routine dental appointment. I left dinner that night with an odd mixture of disappointment and liberation. Their indifference hurt, but it also freed me from seeking approval I would never receive. The next morning, I accepted the Denver position. The following weeks were filled with logistics, securing an apartment through virtual tours, negotiating my start date, planning the physical move. I told friends and colleagues about my decision. Most expressed genuine happiness for my opportunity while lamenting my departure. My boss offered a counterproposal to keep me, which was flattering but insufficient to compete with Denver's creative potential. As my departure date approached, I made one final attempt to connect meaningfully with my family. I invited my parents to dinner at my apartment, something I'd done only a few times before. I spent hours preparing my father's favorite pot roast and my mother's preferred lemon tart dessert. I cleaned meticulously, arranged family photos on the mantel, and even bought a bottle of the wine my father had once mentioned enjoying. 2 hours before they were due to arrive, my mother texted, "Need to cancel tonight. Stephanie's department is giving her an achievement award. Ceremony starts at 7. Rain check?" I stared at the message for several minutes before responding with a simple, "No problem. Congratulations to Stephanie." I didn't suggest rescheduling. Instead, I invited Alexis over. We ate pot roast, drank my father's wine, and talked about Denver. After she left, I drafted a group text to my entire family. Wanted to let everyone know I've accepted the position in Denver. Moving date is set for next Thursday. New address will be Aspen Ridge Apartments, 1420 Mountain View Drive, Denver, CO. Will send updated contact info once I'm settled. The responses trickled in over the next day. "Good luck with the move," from Stephanie. "Cool. Let us know when you visit. We can grab beers," from the twins. "Denver's got a decent team this season," from Eric. "Drive safely, dear," from my mother. My father sent a thumbs-up emoji. No one asked why I was moving, if I needed help, or how I felt about the change. No one requested more details or expressed that they would miss me. Their responses confirmed what I already knew: my physical absence would barely register in their lives because my presence barely did. On moving day, I loaded the rental truck alone. No family members offered to help, and I didn't ask. As I pulled away from the apartment complex that had been home for 7 years, I felt a curious lightness, something between grief and relief. The 20-hour drive from Phoenix to Denver gave me plenty of time to reflect. I crossed state lines listening to audiobooks and podcasts about fresh starts and reinvention. The landscape gradually transformed from desert expanses to mountain vistas, a physical manifestation of the life transition I was making. I arrived at my new apartment complex late on a Friday evening. The property manager had arranged for contactless check-in, leaving my keys in a lockbox. My footsteps echoed in the empty one-bedroom unit as I explored what would become home. The space was modern and bright, with large windows overlooking the city lights and distant mountains. It felt both sterile and full of possibility. That first night, I slept on an air mattress, surrounded by stacked boxes. The emptiness was both liberating and terrifying. No one knew where I was. No one was waiting for my call to confirm safe arrival. I was completely untethered from my previous life, invisible not by family oversight, but by geographic reality. I sent a brief group text. Made it to Denver safely. Apartment is great. Starting unpacking tomorrow. My mother responded first. That's nice, dear. We're having lasagna for Sunday dinner. Eric's bringing his new girlfriend. I stared at the message, momentarily disoriented by the disconnection between my significant life event and her dinner menu update. It was as if she expected me to still show up at the table despite being in another state. The next morning, I woke early and began methodically unpacking. By Sunday evening, my apartment had taken shape, furniture assembled, kitchen organized, clothes hung. I ordered takeout from a nearby Thai restaurant and ate while watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. I didn't call home. They didn't call me. Monday morning marked my first day at Elevation Visuals. I arrived 30 minutes early, coffee in hand, stomach fluttering with nervous anticipation. The office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass and steel and creative energy. The reception area featured award-winning campaigns created by the team I was joining. Russell, the creative director, David, greeted me with a firm handshake and genuine warmth. We're thrilled to have you on board. Let me introduce you to everyone. What followed was a whirlwind of names, faces, and welcoming smiles. People had actually read my portfolio. They referenced specific projects I'd completed. They asked thoughtful questions about my creative process. By lunchtime, I'd been invited to join 3 different team members at a nearby cafe. By day's end, I had been thoroughly welcomed, oriented, and integrated into ongoing projects. How was your first day? David asked as we wrapped up. Honestly, amazing, I replied. Everyone's been so attentive. He laughed. That's just basic courtesy. But I'm glad you're feeling welcome. Your perspective is exactly what we needed on the Henderson campaign. Those mock-ups you sent over last week already have the client excited. I walked back to my apartment in a daze of validation. My ideas mattered here. My presence was not just acknowledged but valued. It was professionally intoxicating. The pattern continued in the following weeks. My creative concepts were praised, refined, and implemented. Colleagues sought my input on their projects. The marketing director mentioned my fresh eye in a company-wide email. I was visible, respected, and increasingly confident. Outside work, I gradually built a new social circle. My across-the-hall neighbor Patrick invited me to a building mixer where I met several residents. A weekend photography expedition to Rocky Mountain National Park connected me with the local photography club. I joined a casual basketball league at the community center. Most significantly, I met Michael at a gallery opening for local artists. He was a graphic designer with an architecture firm, with an easy laugh and attentive listening skills that immediately put me at ease. We bonded over creative processes and Colorado microbrews. Our friendship developed naturally, conversations flowing effortlessly from professional to personal. When he asked me to dinner 3 weeks later, the transition from friendship to something more felt organic and right. Meanwhile, contact with my family dwindled to occasional text exchanges. "How's the new job?" my mother would ask. "Going well. Leading the visual strategy for a major outdoor equipment retailer," I'd reply. "That's nice. The twins are thinking about starting a food truck business." No follow-up questions about my work. No queries about my new city or apartment. No mentions of missing me at Sunday dinners. I maintained the connection with minimal effort, sending generic updates and responding to their messages with appropriate interest. I congratulated Eric on his team's victories, asked Stephanie about her research, and offered cautious encouragement for the twins' entrepreneurial schemes. I was performing the role of family member from a distance, and no one seemed to notice the difference from when I had been physically present but emotionally distant. The Sunday dinner pattern continued in a modified form. For the first few months, my mother would text Sunday morning, "Dinner at 6 tonight." I would respond with increasingly vague excuses. "Can't make it. Working on a deadline. Have plans with friends tonight. Not feeling well." Eventually, I stopped offering excuses altogether. I simply didn't respond to the dinner invitations. Curiously, no one called to ask why I wasn't there. No one commented on my consistent absence. It was as if they set a place out of habit, but didn't actually register that the chair remained empty week after week. By the 6-month mark, my mother's texts had changed slightly. "We missed you at dinner today." Not, "Where were you?" or "Why didn't you come?" but a passive acknowledgement of absence without questioning its cause. I would respond with equally passive regret. "Sorry to miss it. Hope everyone's well." In Denver, my life expanded to fill the space created by family absence. I developed routines that prioritized my interests and needs. Weekend mornings were dedicated to photography excursions. Sunday evenings became standing dinner dates with Michael. I joined a book club, volunteered at a youth arts program, and submitted work to local photography exhibitions. For the first time, I was living entirely for myself, not performing invisibility for an audience that never watched. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had to physically remove myself to begin emotionally existing. The first major test of my new independence came with Thanksgiving, approximately 4 months after my move. Family holidays had always been mandatory attendance events in the Tucker household, with my mother coordinating elaborate meals and my father presiding over traditions with benevolent authority. Missing a holiday gathering was simply not done. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, my mother texted, "Dinner at 4 on Thanksgiving. Stephanie's bringing her department colleague. The twins are handling dessert this year, so expect something experimental." The message contained no acknowledgement that I lived in another state, no question about my travel plans, no recognition that attending would require significant effort on my part, just the assumption that I would appear as usual, sliding into my assigned role in the family tableau. I stared at my phone, considering my response. The simplest approach would be honesty. "Mom, I'm in Denver now. I can't just drop by for dinner." But something held me back, a mix of curiosity and lingering hurt. How long would it take them to truly register my absence? Instead, I replied, "Can't make it this year. Work obligations." It wasn't entirely untrue. I had volunteered to create visual content for a pro bono holiday campaign for a local homeless shelter. But my schedule was flexible. I could have flown to Phoenix if I'd wanted to. My mother's response came quickly. "That's disappointing. Your father will miss seeing you." I doubted this was true. In 32 years, my father had rarely initiated conversation with me beyond perfunctory greetings and obligatory inquiries about work. The claim that he would particularly miss me felt like emotional manipulation disguised as concern. On Thanksgiving Day, my mother called briefly between dinner preparations. "Happy Thanksgiving, dear. We're just about to put the turkey in." "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom. Hope everyone enjoys the meal." Eric brought his new girlfriend. "She's a physical therapist. Very pretty." "That's nice. Tell everyone hello for me. When do you think you'll visit? The guest room is always available." "Not sure yet. Work's been busy." "Well, don't be a stranger. Family is important." The irony of this statement wasn't lost on me. Family was supposedly important, Yet no one had noticed I'd moved to another state. No one had asked for my new address. No one had suggested visiting me in Denver. I spent Thanksgiving with a group of holiday orphans, other transplants to Denver, without local family connections. Michael hosted at his more spacious apartment, coordinating a potluck feast that combined traditional dishes with creative alternatives. We played board games, shared family stories, both heartwarming and horrifying, and drank perhaps too much wine. I took photographs that captured genuine connection and belonging emotions I'd rarely experienced at my family's precisely choreographed holiday gatherings. The Christmas season brought similar dynamics into focus. My mother texted in early December, "We're doing Secret Santa this year. You drew Stephanie. $50 limit. Need your wish list by the 15th. Again, the assumption that I would participate as if distance were no obstacle. I briefly considered pointing out the logistical challenges, but instead responded, "Sounds good. I'll mail Stephanie's gift." I selected a thoughtful present for my sister, a leather journal embossed with her initials and a fountain pen from a Denver artisan shop. I packaged it carefully with a note on my new Denver photography business cards, which clearly displayed my Colorado address. I shipped it 2 weeks before Christmas, using my Denver return address on the package. My family's gifts arrived in a large box shipped by my mother. The card was signed by everyone, with no personal messages. Inside were generic presents: a department store sweater, a best-selling thriller, a gift card to a national coffee chain. Nothing that reflected specific knowledge of my interests or personality. Nothing that couldn't have been purchased for any adult male relative. On Christmas Eve, my parents arranged a group video call. The camera panned around their living room, showing familiar decorations and gathered family members. Eric and his girlfriend sat close together on the sofa. Stephanie examined the book I'd sent her with apparent appreciation. The twins wrestled over the last Christmas cookie. My parents coordinated the technical aspects of the call with minimal success. "Russell, can you see everyone?" my mother asked, her face uncomfortably close to the camera. "Yes, I can see you all. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," came the chorus of responses. What followed was 20 minutes of family updates directed at me, with occasional questions that required only brief answers. No one commented on my apartment visible in the background, so clearly not my Phoenix place with its distinctive desert-themed decor. No one asked about my Denver life beyond surface-level inquiries about work. The conversation remained superficial and one-sided. After the call ended, I sat in my new apartment, surrounded by twinkling lights, and the small tabletop tree Michael had helped me decorate. The physical distance between Phoenix and Denver seemed far less significant than the emotional distance that had always existed between me and my family. Christmas Day brought another surprise. Michael invited me to join his family's celebration. His parents had driven in from Colorado Springs, and his sister flew in from Seattle with her husband and children. They welcomed me warmly, incorporated me into their traditions, and asked genuinely interested questions about my photography and work. His mother insisted I join the family photo, positioning me next to Michael with natural inclusion. The contrast with my own family experience was both healing and painful. My birthday fell in March, marking 3 months since Christmas and 7 months since my move. I woke to several generic social media wishes from extended family and acquaintances, but nothing from my immediate family. By evening, I'd received texts from the twins, "Happy B-Day, bro," and Stephanie, "Happy birthday. Hope work is going well." Nothing from my parents until the following day, when my mother wrote, "Just realized we missed your birthday yesterday. Sorry about that. Hope it was a good one." I had spent the day being thoroughly celebrated by my new Denver circle. Michael surprised me with breakfast in bed. My colleagues arranged for lunch delivery from my favorite sandwich shop. The photography club members presented me with a custom camera strap. My neighbor invited me for rooftop drinks with building friends. Every interaction included specific acknowledgments of my presence in their lives and the value they placed on our connection. The 6-month mark in Denver coincided with a significant professional achievement, a promotion to Associate Creative Director, overseeing a team of visual content specialists for the agency's outdoor recreation accounts. The position came with a salary increase, expanded responsibilities, and validation of my creative leadership. When I shared this news in the family group chat, the responses were predictably underwhelming. "Congratulations." From Stephanie. From my father. "That's nice, dear. Does this mean more work hours?" From my mother. Nothing from Eric or the twins. Meanwhile, my relationship with Michael deepened into something substantial and nurturing. He understood my family history without judgment, offering perspective without dismissing my feelings. We established routines together: Sunday farmers market visits, Wednesday night cooking experiments, weekend hiking adventures. He attended my photography exhibition opening, proudly introducing me to friends and colleagues. I supported his architectural visualization projects, offering creative feedback and celebration of his accomplishments. As my Denver life flourished, my absence from family events in Phoenix continued without significant comment. I missed Eric's regional coaching award ceremony, sending a congratulatory text instead. I declined attendance at Stephanie's engagement party, mailing a gift card with my regrets. My parents' anniversary celebration passed with a phone call rather than physical presence. The twins' college graduation warranted gifts and a video message. For each event, I provided plausible excuses about work commitments or prior engagements. Not once did anyone question the pattern of consistent absence or express particular disappointment that I wasn't there. Not once did anyone ask, "Why don't we ever see you anymore?" Or, "When are you planning to visit?" It was as if my role in family gatherings had been so peripheral that my permanent absence created barely a ripple in the established dynamic. The summer brought the annual Tucker family vacation to San Diego, a tradition dating back to my childhood. My mother texted details with her usual assumption of participation, rented the same beach house as last year. Arriving July 15th. Eric's girlfriend coming, Stephanie bringing fiancé. The twins have some surfing competition planned. Dad's looking forward to golfing with you. This last point was particularly puzzling, as my father and I had never golfed together. I suspected she'd confused me with Eric, who occasionally joined our father on the links. I replied simply, "Won't be able to make it this year. That's too bad." "Maybe next summer," came the response. No questions about why, no expressions of disappointment, no acknowledgement of my now consistent absence from family gatherings. As I approached the one-year mark in Denver, the reality became increasingly clear. My physical removal from Phoenix had caused barely a ripple in my family's consciousness, because my emotional presence had been equally insubstantial for years. The invisible middle child remained unseen, whether standing in the family living room or living 800 miles away. My one-year anniversary in Denver arrived with beautiful symmetry the same clear August day, the same mountain view from my apartment window, but a profoundly different Russell occupying the space. The year had transformed me professionally, socially, and emotionally. At work, I had established myself as a creative force, with 3 industry awards now displayed in my office. My team respected my leadership, while clients requested me specifically for campaigns requiring innovative, visual storytelling. The promotion to Associate Creative Director had been followed by expanded responsibilities and recognition throughout the agency. My photography side business had grown from occasional gigs to regular weekend bookings, primarily outdoor portraits and wilderness landscapes that captured Colorado's dramatic natural beauty. Several local galleries now carried my work, and a Denver lifestyle magazine had featured my mountain series in their summer issue. Personally, my relationship with Michael had evolved into a solid partnership. We spent most nights together, dividing time between our respective apartments, while cautiously discussing the possibility of finding a place together when our leases ended. He understood my family history without judgment, offering perspective without dismissing my feelings. My social circle had expanded to include genuine friendships with colleagues, building neighbors, photography club members, and Michael's extended network. I had people who checked in when I was sick, remembered my coffee preferences, and included me in their important moments. I was seen, heard, and valued in ways I'd never experienced in Phoenix. On that anniversary morning, I scrolled through photos from the past year, struck by the visible change in my own expression: more open, more confident, more present. Denver had given me the space to exist fully, without contorting myself to fit into predefined family roles. The catalyst for confrontation came unexpectedly the following week. My father's 60th birthday approached a milestone the family would certainly celebrate elaborately. I had already decided to send a gift rather than attempt the trip to Phoenix, having received no specific invitation despite the significance of the occasion. The day before his birthday, my mother texted, "Dinner tomorrow at 5 for Dad's birthday. Nothing fancy, just family." The casual assumption that I would be there despite a year of consistent absence was so disconnected from reality that I actually laughed aloud in my empty apartment. Did she truly not register that I lived in a different state? That I couldn't simply drive over for dinner? I decided to be explicitly clear. "Mom, I can't drive from Denver to Phoenix on a day's notice for dinner." Her response came quickly. "Don't be silly. You don't need to drive all the way from downtown. We know traffic is bad after work. Just come when you can." I stared at the message, momentarily questioning my own sanity. Downtown? She thought I meant downtown Phoenix? After a full year of absence, mail from a Denver address, and numerous references to Colorado in our limited conversations. "Mom, I live in Denver, Colorado. I have for a year now. I can't come to Dad's birthday dinner unless I get on a plane, which isn't possible tomorrow." 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her response finally came through. "Don't be ridiculous, Russell. If you don't want to come, just say so. No need for exaggerations." The dismissal was so typical yet so surreal, given the circumstances, that I didn't immediately respond. Instead, I called Michael, who listened to my incredulous recounting of the exchange. "They really don't know you moved?" he asked, his disbelief matching mine. "How is that possible after a full year?" "I've been wondering that myself," I admitted. "I'm going to try an experiment." Over the next few weeks, I deliberately peppered family communications with explicit Denver references. In the group chat, I mentioned the recent snowfall on the Front Range. I shared photos of my apartment balcony with the Rocky Mountains visible in the background. I commented on the Broncos' recent game and mentioned running into a player at a local coffee shop. I asked if anyone had recommendations for Phoenix restaurants to suggest to a Denver colleague planning a visit. Not once did anyone in my family question or even acknowledge these obvious indicators that I was living in another state. The conversations continued as if I had mentioned mundane details about local Phoenix weather or sports. "The twins are launching their food truck next month," my mother texted after I'd shared a photo of myself hiking a 14,000-foot Colorado peak. "Eric's team made regionals," my father commented after I mentioned attending a Denver gallery opening. It was as if we were having parallel conversations, me clearly communicating from Colorado, and them responding from an alternate reality where I still lived down the street in Phoenix. As the second Thanksgiving approached, my mother's predictable invitation arrived. "Dinner at 4 on Thanksgiving. Stephanie and Robert are hosting this year. Bringing anything special?" I decided to be explicitly clear in my response. "I won't be traveling from Denver for Thanksgiving this year." "Suit yourself," she replied. "We'll miss you." The casual dismissal after a year of such disconnection pushed me toward a breaking point. I spent an extra session with my therapist that week, discussing family dynamics and healthy boundaries. "It's beyond peculiar that they haven't registered your move," Dr. Harper noted. "What do you think is happening there?" "Honestly, I think I've always been so peripheral to their awareness that my physical absence doesn't register differently than my emotional absence did when I lived nearby." "And how does that make you feel?" she asked. "Angry, hurt, but also validated? Like all those years of feeling invisible weren't just in my head." Michael was more direct in his assessment. "Russell, at some point you need to confront this directly, not just for closure, but because there's something deeply unhealthy about this level of denial or obliviousness." I knew he was right, but part of me wanted to see how long the charade could continue. Would they notice if I missed a second Christmas? A third? Would they ever realize I wasn't just busy but actually gone? As the holiday season progressed, I drafted and deleted numerous messages, attempting to clarify the situation. Each attempt felt simultaneously too confrontational and too explanatory. Why should I have to announce my absence when they should have noticed it long ago? Why should I have to justify decisions I'd clearly communicated a year earlier? I decided to wait until after the holidays. My Denver celebration would include Michael's family again, plus friends who had become chosen family over the past year. I would deal with my biological family's bizarre denial in the new year. But fate had other plans. 3 weeks before Christmas, my phone rang with my mother's ringtone, an unusual occurrence given our primarily text-based communication pattern. "Russell," her voice carried unusual tension. "I need to talk to you about family gatherings." "What about them?" I asked cautiously. "You've missed every gathering for almost a year. Eric's award ceremony, Stephanie's engagement party, our anniversary, your father's birthday, family vacation, and who knows what else. What kind of son does that?" The accusatory tone ignited a year's worth of suppressed frustration. After 12 months of them not noticing my absence, she was now angry about it? The absurdity was almost comical. Because I moved to Denver, I stated simply, keeping my voice level despite the emotions churning beneath. The silence that followed stretched for so long, I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "No, you didn't." "Yes, Mom. I moved to Denver, Colorado last August. I've been living here for over a year." Another long pause. "That's not true. You're just making excuses." The confrontation I had both dreaded and needed had finally arrived. "Mom," I said carefully, "I moved to Denver in August of last year. I've been living here for 15 months now." "Don't be ridiculous," she scoffed, but I detected uncertainty beneath the dismissal. "You've been at Sunday dinners, maybe not every week, but when was the last time you actually saw me in person?" I interrupted. The silence that followed was telling. "Well, not recently, but you've been busy with work. We understood that." "Mom, I accepted a job at Elevation Visuals in Denver. I told everyone at Sunday dinner. I sent a group text with my moving date and new address. I've been sending mail from Colorado for over a year. My return address is clearly Denver. I've mentioned Denver in nearly every conversation we've had." "I thought you were just traveling for work," she said weakly, "or being dramatic about moving to a different part of Phoenix." The cognitive dissonance was staggering. My own mother had mentally reframed a cross-state move as a neighborhood change or extended business trip rather than acknowledge the reality of my absence. "I live in Denver," I repeated firmly. "I have an apartment here. I have a life here. I haven't been in Phoenix since I moved." "That can't be right," she insisted, but her voice had lost its certainty. "Why wouldn't you tell us you were moving to another state?" "I did tell you. Multiple times. No one listened." Another lengthy silence followed. "I need to call you back," she said finally. 2 hours later, my phone rang again. This time, it was a video call request from my mother's phone. When I accepted, I saw my entire family gathered in the living room of my parents' house, my mother and father on the sofa, Eric and Stephanie flanking them, the twins perched on adjacent armchairs. Their expressions ranged from confused to defensive to embarrassed. "Russell," my father spoke first, his tone businesslike. "Your mother tells me you're claiming to have moved to Denver last year without telling anyone." "I did move to Denver," I corrected, "and I told everyone. Multiple times. No one listened." I tilted my phone to show my apartment the mountain view through the windows, the distinctly non-Phoenix decor, the environment so obviously not the place they'd occasionally visited in Arizona. "That could be anywhere," Eric said dismissively. "A hotel, a friend's place. This is my home," I replied evenly. "I've lived here for 15 months. I have a Colorado driver's license. I pay Colorado taxes. I have Colorado license plates on my car." "Why would you just leave without saying goodbye properly?" Stephanie asked, her expression troubled. "I tried to say goodbye," I reminded her. "I invited Mom and Dad to dinner before I left. You all canceled for your award ceremony. I sent a detailed group text about my move. I've referenced Denver countless times in our conversations. I remember you mentioning some job," my father frowned, "but I thought it was just a promotion within your Phoenix company. I told you specifically it was in Denver and would require relocation," I said. You told me Denver had a solid economy but a competitive housing market. My father looked genuinely confused. I don't recall that conversation. That's the problem, I said quietly. None of you recall conversations with me. None of you notice when I'm not there. None of you really see me. The twins exchanged glances. Dude, we thought you were just busy with work and stuff, Justin offered. You always were kind of independent. Independent because I had to be, I clarified. Invisible because you made me that way. My mother's eyes filled with tears. That's not fair, Russell. We've always loved you the same as all our children. Maybe you thought you did, I acknowledged. But you didn't show it. Do you know how many of my swim meets you attended? 2. Do you know why I stopped sharing news about promotions and projects? Because you'd immediately change the subject to Eric's coaching or Stephanie's research. Do you know why I finally left Phoenix? Because I realized I could be physically absent, and none of you would actually notice the difference. We noticed you weren't at gatherings, my father protested. But you didn't notice I wasn't in the same state, I countered. For over a year, an uncomfortable silence settled over the video call. Maybe we've been a bit distracted, my mother offered weakly. You've been distracted my entire life, I said. I was never the star athlete like Eric, never the academic prodigy like Stephanie, never the troublemakers like the twins. I was just there, until I wasn't. And even then, you didn't notice. You're exaggerating, Eric said defensively. We're not mind readers, Russell. If you felt left out, you should have said something. I did say something. I said I was moving to Denver. I said I got a new job. I said I had a new address. I've been saying things for years, but none of you have been listening. Stephanie, always the most perceptive of my siblings, looked genuinely troubled. I think Russell might have a point, she said slowly. When was the last time any of us asked him a question about his life and actually waited for the answer? The question hung heavily in the virtual space between us. This is ridiculous, my father said, standing abruptly. I have work to finish. We can discuss this another time when everyone's being more reasonable. He walked out of frame. Dad's just processing, Stephanie said diplomatically. This is a lot to take in. For you, maybe, I replied. I've been living with it my whole life. My mother wiped her eyes. Russell, honey, if we've made you feel unseen, I'm truly sorry. That was never our intention. We love you very much. Intention doesn't change impact, I said, echoing words from therapy sessions. And a year of not noticing my absence speaks louder than any declaration of love now. What do you want from us? Eric asked, his tone somewhere between defensive and genuinely curious. I want acknowledgement. I want you to see that this pattern is real and has been damaging. I want actual interest in my life, not just surface questions that you forget the answers to immediately. I want relationships based on genuine connection, not obligatory family roles. And if we can't provide that? My mother asked tremulously. Then I'll continue building my life with people who can, I said simply. I have friends here who notice when I'm absent from a single gathering, let alone an entire year. I have colleagues who remember details about my projects and ask meaningful follow-up questions. I have a partner who sees me fully and values my presence in his life. A partner? Stephanie perked up. You're dating someone? I've been with Michael for 9 months, I confirmed. I've mentioned him in conversations before. The blank looks confirmed they hadn't registered this significant detail of my life either. We need time to process this, my mother said finally. But I want you to know we do love you, Russell, even if we've done a poor job of showing it. Love without attention isn't love, I said quietly. It's just a word. The call ended shortly after, with awkward goodbyes and promises to talk again soon. I sat in my Denver apartment feeling emotionally drained but strangely liberated. The invisibility I'd experienced for decades had finally been named, acknowledged, and confronted. Michael came over that evening, listening attentively as I recounted the conversation. How do you feel? He asked, holding my hand across the dinner table. Exhausted, validated, sad, relieved, all of it at once. Do you regret confronting them? I considered the question carefully. No. Whether anything changes or not, I needed to speak my truth. I needed to stop accepting invisibility as my default state. He squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I see you very clearly, Russell Tucker, and I like what I see. For the first time in my life, I fully believed someone when they said they saw me. The days following the confrontation brought silence from my family. No texts, no calls, no acknowledgments of our conversation. I wasn't surprised, though a part of me had hoped for immediate reflection and changed behavior. Real growth rarely happens overnight, especially when it requires dismantling decades of established family dynamics. I focused on my Denver life-work projects, photography bookings, time with Michael and friends. I discussed the family confrontation in therapy, processing the complex emotions it had triggered. Dr. Harper helped me navigate the balance between maintaining boundaries and remaining open to potential healing. Reconciliation doesn't mean returning to old patterns, she reminded me. It means building new, healthier ones if and only if everyone is willing to do the necessary work. 2 weeks after our video call, a thick envelope arrived from Phoenix. Inside was a handwritten letter from my mother, 8 pages of her distinctive cursive flowing across monogram stationery. Dear Russell, it began. I've written and rewritten this letter a dozen times, trying to find the right words. Maybe there aren't right words for acknowledging such a profound failure to see my own son. She continued with specific memories from my childhood and youth, surprising details about art projects I'd created, conversations we'd had, moments she'd treasured. She acknowledged how these personal connections had been overshadowed by the constant demands of balancing 5 children with different needs and personalities. This isn't an excuse, she wrote, but perhaps an explanation of how we lost sight of you while you were standing right in front of us. The quiet child often receives less attention, not because they're less loved, but because they seem less needy. It was wrong of us to mistake your self-sufficiency for a lack of need for connection. She directly addressed the Denver situation. I've spent days trying to understand how we missed something so significant. I've reviewed texts, checked mail I'd set aside, looked through photos. The evidence of your move was everywhere, just as you said. We simply failed to register it because it didn't fit our mental image of family functioning. We couldn't imagine you truly leaving, so we unconsciously reframed every sign to maintain our comfortable illusion. The letter concluded with a request, not a demand. We would like to visit you in Denver, if you're open to it. Not to pull you back into old patterns, but to see and acknowledge the life you've built. To meet Michael, see your work, and begin building a new kind of relationship, one where you are fully seen and valued. If you're not ready, we understand. This healing will happen on your timeline, not ours. I read the letter 3 times before calling Michael to share it. His cautious optimism matched my own. It sounds promising, he observed. But letters are easier than changed behavior. My father called the following weekend. Our conversation was awkward but unexpectedly genuine. I'm not good at this emotional stuff, he admitted. Never have been. But I want you to know I'm trying to understand how I contributed to you feeling invisible. He spoke about his own upbringing in a household where emotional expression was discouraged, where achievement was valued over connection. He acknowledged falling into the same patterns with his own children, particularly with me. I always thought you were the one I didn't need to worry about, he said. Eric had his sports pressures. Stephanie pushed herself too hard academically. The twins were constantly in some kind of trouble. But you seemed fine. I mistook your self-reliance for not needing attention. Being low maintenance doesn't mean no maintenance, I pointed out. I'm learning that, he agreed. Too late, probably, but I'm learning. My siblings reached out individually over the following weeks. Eric's message was brief but surprisingly honest. I never realized how much the spotlight affected you. I'm sorry I didn't make more room. Stephanie sent a thoughtful email analyzing family dynamics with her typical academic thoroughness, concluding with a personal note. I always admired your creativity and independence, but I never told you that. I should have. The twins sent a jointly recorded video message that mixed humor with genuine regret. We always thought you had it together while we were the mess. Turns out maybe we all needed different things that none of us were getting. I responded to each overture with cautious openness, neither rushing forgiveness nor closing the door on potential healing. In therapy, I worked through my conflicted feelings, the lingering hurt, alongside the appreciation for their efforts now. 3 months after the confrontation, my parents visited Denver. I agreed to host them for a weekend, setting clear boundaries about scheduling and expectations. Michael offered to join us for selected activities, providing both support and breathing room. Their arrival was tentative, the initial greeting in my apartment lobby awkward with unspoken emotions. My mother hugged me longer than usual. My father shook my hand and then, in an uncharacteristic move, pulled me into a brief embrace. "Your place is beautiful," my mother said, admiring the mountain view from my living room windows. "So different from Phoenix, but I can see why you love it." "Thank you for inviting us," my father added, his gaze taking in the photography prints displayed on my walls. "These are your work? They're remarkable." The genuine interest felt unfamiliar but welcome. Over the weekend, they made visible efforts to engage differently, asking specific questions about my job, listening attentively to my answers, admiring my photography with genuine appreciation. When Michael joined us for dinner, they asked thoughtful questions about his architectural work and our relationship, treating him as significant rather than peripheral. There were awkward moments and old patterns that briefly resurfaced, my father checking sports scores during conversation, my mother momentarily dominating discussions with Phoenix family updates. But when these occurred, they caught themselves, sometimes with a self-deprecating comment about old habits. On their final evening in Denver, my mother addressed the elephant in the room. "We can't undo the past," she said quietly, as we shared dessert at a local restaurant. "But we can do better going forward. If you'll give us that chance." "I'd like that," I said sincerely. "But it needs to be consistent, not just a temporary correction that reverts once the shock wears off." "We understand," my father nodded. "This visit has been eye-opening, seeing your life here, your work, your friends. You've built something significant, son. We should have noticed sooner, but we see it now." Their departure the next morning felt different from previous family goodbyes, more mindful, less routine. The hug my father gave me communicated regret and hope in equal measure. In the months that followed, our communication patterns gradually evolved. Weekly video calls replaced sporadic texts. Conversations became more balanced, with genuine exchanges rather than one-sided updates. My parents asked about Denver, my work, my photography, Michael. They remembered details from previous conversations and followed up appropriately. When I visited Phoenix 6 months after their Denver trip, the experience was markedly different from past family gatherings. My siblings made efforts to connect individually, creating space for meaningful interaction amid the typical family chaos. Sunday dinner included actual questions about my life and work. My mother had printed and framed several of my photographs, displaying them proudly alongside other family mementos. Most significantly, my father took me aside during that visit, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I've been reviewing old family videos," he said, looking for moments I missed. "There's footage from your high school graduation. You gave that speech I didn't attend. You were eloquent, confident. I should have been there." "Yes, you should have," I agreed, not softening the truth but not wielding it as a weapon either. He nodded, accepting the statement without defensiveness. "I'm proud of the man you've become, Russell. I wish I could take credit, but you did that largely without my guidance. I hope to know that man better in the years ahead." The healing continued gradually, with occasional setbacks and regressions. Old patterns sometimes resurfaced during holidays or stressful periods. The difference was that now these lapses were acknowledged rather than ignored, addressed rather than perpetuated. Michael and I eventually found an apartment together in Denver, combining our lives in a Mountain View condo with space for both his architectural drafting and my photography studio. My family attended our housewarming via video call, sending thoughtful gifts that reflected actual knowledge of our tastes and interests. 1 year after the confrontation call, I reflected on the journey with my therapist. The irony, I observed, is that I had to make myself physically absent to become emotionally visible. Sometimes distance creates the perspective necessary for change, Dr. Harper noted. You created the space for both yourself and your family to see patterns that proximity had normalized. The most profound change wasn't in my family's behavior, though that had improved significantly. The most meaningful transformation was in my own self-perception. I no longer defined myself by my invisibility. I no longer accepted being overlooked as my natural state. I had built a life where I was seen, valued, and integral, not peripheral. I had learned to take up space unapologetically, to express needs directly, to expect acknowledgement of my presence and contributions. The invisible middle child had become a visible, confident man with boundaries, expectations, and a voice that demanded hearing. The journey wasn't complete. Family healing rarely is. But we were moving in the right direction, each of us learning new ways of connecting across the physical distance and emotional terrain between us. As I stood on my Denver balcony watching the sunset paint the mountains in amber and gold, Michael's arm around my shoulders, I felt a profound peace. Sometimes leaving is necessary for others to notice your absence and value your presence. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to refuse to remain invisible. Have you ever had to create distance to be truly seen? Drop a comment sharing your experience with family dynamics or how you've established healthy boundaries. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family, growth, and self-discovery. And remember, being low maintenance doesn't mean no maintenance. You deserve to be seen, heard, and valued exactly as you are. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage in your own path to visibility and authentic connection.